6 beers, 6 ingredient lists. One simple question: what's actually inside the beer most people in the UK are drinking? Beer has been brewed for thousands of years with just 4 basic ingredients: water, malted barley, hops and yeast. That's the classic formula. Simple enough that monks were brewing it centuries ago without labs, marketing departments or giant factories. But if you walk into a modern UK supermarket today, grab a few popular beers from the shelf and actually look at how they're made, things start to get a little more complicated. So I picked 6 beers you can find almost everywhere in the UK: Carling, Foster's, Stella Artois, Peroni Nastro Azzurro, BrewDog Punk IPA and Guinness. I looked at their ingredient information, brewing details and what the breweries themselves say about how these beers are produced. And out of these 6, only 2 really stay close to that classic simple formula. The rest start adding extra ingredients that change how the beer is brewed and why it tastes the way it does. Let's start with Carling, one of the most common beers in the UK. If you walk into a supermarket or a pub, chances are you'll see Carling somewhere. It's marketed as a straightforward, easy drinking lager. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just beer. But when you look at the ingredient information from the brewer, you'll notice something interesting. Carling uses barley malt, which is expected, but it also uses glucose syrup during fermentation. Now, technically, this isn't unusual in large-scale brewing. A lot of industrial lagers use additional sugars because yeast can ferment them very easily. The result is a lighter, cleaner beer that's cheaper to produce and easier to keep consistent when you're brewing massive volumes. But it also means the beer isn't just barley, hops, water and yeast anymore. Glucose syrup is basically there to feed the yeast and make fermentation more predictable. From a traditional brewing perspective, that's already a step away from the classic 4-ingredient formula people usually imagine when they think about beer. Next is Foster's, another extremely common supermarket lager in the UK. Foster's is famous for its Australian branding, even though most of the beer sold in Britain is brewed in the UK. Just like Carling, Foster's is designed to be very light and very easy to drink. And when you start digging into the brewing process, you'll see a similar approach. Along with barley malt, the brewing process also uses additional sugars during fermentation to control the final flavor and body of the beer. Large breweries do this because they need the product to taste exactly the same every single time. Whether you buy a can today or 6 months from now, it needs to be identical. Using extra sugars helps create that consistency and keeps the flavor light. Again, this doesn't make the beer unusual for a mass-produced lager, but it does mean the ingredient profile is moving further away from that traditional brewing simplicity. Now let's talk about Stella Artois, which is often positioned as a more premium lager in the UK market. The branding leans heavily on tradition, Belgian heritage, and classic brewing history. When you look at the ingredient information, Stella is actually closer to traditional brewing than the first 2 beers we looked at, but there's still an extra ingredient involved. Stella Artois is brewed with water, malted barley, maize, hops, and yeast. The key detail here is maize, which is basically corn. Corn has been used in lager brewing for a very long time because it makes the beer lighter, smoother, and a bit less heavy on the malt flavor. Many large breweries use it for exactly that reason. So Stella still contains the classic barley and hops combination, but maize is added to shape the final taste and make the beer more crisp and easy to drink. Again, it's a very common brewing technique, but it's not the pure barley-based formula people often imagine. Then we have Peroni Nastro Azzurro, another beer that carries a strong premium image in the UK. The branding focuses heavily on Italian style, clean design, and a sort of effortless lifestyle vibe. But when you look at how Peroni is brewed, the ingredient list is actually very similar to Stella. Peroni uses water, barley malt, hops, and maize. In fact, the brand specifically highlights the use of Italian maize as part of the recipe. Just like with Stella, the maize helps lighten the body of the beer and create that crisp lager taste people associate with Peroni. It's not a secret ingredient or anything unusual in the brewing world, but it does mean the beer isn't purely barley-based. Instead, it's a carefully engineered lager designed to be smooth, refreshing, and very easy to drink. Now let's switch from big industrial lagers to something from the craft beer world, BrewDog Punk IPA. This is where things start to look a bit different. BrewDog built its brand around craft brewing, strong flavors, and a more traditional approach to ingredients. When you check the ingredient information for Punk IPA, the list is surprisingly simple: water, malted barley, hops, and yeast. That's it. No glucose syrup, no maize, no extra sugars added to lighten the beer. Instead, BrewDog focuses heavily on hops to create the flavor profile. Craft breweries usually prioritize flavor over mass production efficiency, which is why they often stick closer to traditional brewing ingredients. In the case of Punk IPA, the beer relies on a mix of different hops to produce its distinctive taste and aroma, but the actual ingredient list stays very close to the classic 4-ingredient formula. So this is the first beer on our list that really follows the traditional brewing approach. And finally, we get to Guinness, one of the most famous beers in the world. Guinness has been brewed for more than 2 centuries, and the ingredient list is actually very straightforward. Guinness is made with water, barley, roasted barley, hops, and yeast. The roasted barley is what gives Guinness its dark color and that slightly coffee-like flavor people recognize immediately. Aside from that, the brewing process is remarkably traditional. There are no added sugars like glucose syrup and no maize used to lighten the beer. It's mostly just grain, hops, yeast, and water working together the way stout has been brewed for generations. So, out of the 6 beers we looked at, Carling, Foster's, Stella Artois, Peroni Nastro Azzurro, BrewDog Punk IPA, and Guinness, only 2 really stick close to the classic brewing formula built around barley, hops, yeast, and water. Those 2 are BrewDog Punk IPA and Guinness. The other 4 beers use additional ingredients like glucose syrup or maize to shape the flavor and control fermentation in large-scale production. That doesn't automatically make them bad, and it definitely doesn't mean they're unsafe to drink. All of these beers are legally produced and regulated, but what it does show is how modern supermarket beer often looks quite different from the traditional 4-ingredient idea people usually imagine. Once you start checking the ingredient information behind everyday products, even something as simple as beer, you realize the story behind the label is often a lot more interesting than it first appears.